One of the ironies of the discussion about the housing thing, or this affordable housing, is the missing 10,000. The 10,000 people who don't even get into the housing market, they're not allowed to rent or buy, a fifth of the working population. Now, to talk about providing any housing, whether it's affordable or not, and then exclude that number of people, that cannot be acceptable, can it?
No, I don't think it is, and I think that if you look at housing provision in other places pretty close to us, London for example, you've had recent mayors who've had their key worker accommodation programmes to address that very point. There's no real reason without a favourable political will and public support that anything is possible. And I think basically you have to start off with what the island considers to be fair. Personally, I think it's unfair to be inviting key workers to the island to provide positive contributions to our financial services industry or elsewhere in terms of services provided, and then to actually house them in very poor accommodation. It isn't fair at all.
But that's a huge market straight away for the very sort of house we're talking about, affordable housing. Now, why can't we get to grips with that?
There's two issues. There are affordable rents, right, and then there's affordable housing to purchase. And what I've said in the programme that I'm trying to introduce is that the crossover point between the two is that the highest end of the rental becomes the lowest end of the mortgage purchasing market. That's got to be the sensible cut-off point.
But that 10,000, it frustrates me immensely. Again, it's a peripheral, it's an edge of this discussion, but it's also central to the reason why there is no affordable housing, because such a large number of people are kept out of the housing market. Therefore, their money doesn't go into providing these sorts of houses.
You're right, but if affordable housing products are put onto the market, then the returns that need to be gained in order to pay for the building of those products comes down. So it's all connected.
Well, the four people I've been dealing with trying to buy one house between the four, that seems to show to me that the people will do their damnedest to buy a house which is priced nearly £400,000. It's only a 2.5 bedroom house, and it's going to be two families living in there. That they'll do their damnedest to get housed. I know these are people with qualifications. If there are those people who haven't got qualifications, will do the same. They're the people with the money. They will create the housing. They will do it. I can't see the logic of the states pumping in subsidies to keep people in the renting section. And bear in mind, lots of people without housing qualifications get rent subsidies from Social Security because their wages are so low they can't afford to pay their rents. There's something so fundamentally rotten, isn't there?
Well, I would agree with you. I'd actually qualify the agreement in suggesting that there will always be an element of any housing market where people don't wish to purchase, they wish to rent.
From a designer's point of view, Derek, don't you see, obviously that group of people, the 10,000, you've met, apart from farm workers' accommodation, that sort of thing, have you ever been called upon to design for them? Has anybody ever said, design me a lodging house, for example? Convert a guest house to a lodging house, that happens when they get too tatty to run as a guest house, convert them to lodging houses. But why not? How can we ignore this aspect of affordable housing?
Well, you can't, the way Jersey is structured and set up, you cannot. The way the laws are, 5 years to 10 years to buy. It's a moving population, isn't it? It's a transient population. Again, they have to go back to...
But they have to be housed, whether they move on and so on, but there's always somebody needs a bed to sleep in, so...
The problem's kind of... Jersey's turning itself into a kind of an old folks home, private or public. In the old days, you'd have a hotel and you'd have the workers at the hospital, and they would be accommodated within a hotel. It would be what was called staff housing, and Jersey was littered with that. That's drying up, that's kind of gone. The average age, what do you think the average age for first time buying in the UK is?
I would think about 25.
It's actually 37. It's 37. You can't find an age for Jersey, there's nothing to buy, really. So the problem of housing everybody has to be radical. There has to be an offshore island, a quarry that was, whatever. But it can be done. Can be
And
done.
there are other considerations also. The planning fee is a couple of thousand, I think, for a house of this sort of price. Planning and building fees adds up to a couple of thousand, as well as whatever. Stamp duty, if it's
So I think all of those things have been looked at. So we do make.
so you could, I mean, just on costs, and as you say, all the off-site costs, the camera, you can have quite a substantial amount of money, which could be eliminated. But of course, whatever that money is going to, somebody has to pick up the bill for that. So it's merely transferring these costs around, isn't it?
I think the key challenge and the solution is urban regeneration, and that's what the Island Plan for the next 10 years says. But in order to achieve what we'd like to achieve by encouraging housing to be rebuilt to the standards of affordability and the internal layouts that we've been discussing, there has to be a sensible discussion as to which way we're going to go. That inevitably means that the density of these areas has got to go up in order to bring the costs down, and people will have to accept the idea that perhaps some areas of the town can't be kind of mothballed in terms of what's being built, to the extent that that would actually drive any new build into countryside areas, which we're just not going to do.
Of course, it's much easier to put housing into a flat countryside. And the type of affordable housing that's shown on schemes.
But it's certainly not as cost effective. I mean, one of the key things that in my toolbox of methods and things that I can do is to actually, by increasing the density in a particular area. Say, for example, you've got an area of town which is two-storey accommodation. If indeed, with the planner's input, it looks as if we could up the amount of build to 3 stories, 4 stories, or even 5 stories, then that actually represents a huge building potential for that particular site that wouldn't be realised on open greenfield sites, where inevitably the height of the buildings are going to be limited to 2.5 stories. So we've got a huge potential in the town.
I want to talk on for another hour. I don't think our cameraman's got another hour there, but we are, as it happens, in a very innovative building. This is a building which is in multiple independent office suites, but it's got a very noisy roof. And that just reminds me that the rain is absolutely pouring down, and at the end of this season I think there have been an awful lot of farmers delighted to get rid of their land because they've had 3 successive disastrous potato seasons, and I feel sure there have been an awful lot of people out there screaming to put their land to better use. And I don't think housing is a bad use. I don't think there's anything wrong with housing. I think people, if they want to live in the countryside, so-called countryside, in other words, if you want to make another town in what is now the countryside, that is organic development. That's what history does. If that's what happens, I don't think that's a problem. I think there is a big problem with forcing more and more housing into town, and I don't think it works. And a lot of the existing accommodation, regeneration as you call it, the properties cannot be converted to housing. All the requirements, sound, thermal insulation, fire separation, all this, you're going to be finishing up building some very expensive buildings. So I don't think that aspect of it in practical terms, it sounds nice to rejig these buildings and try to keep them.
Regeneration doesn't necessarily mean refurbishment. And what I'm saying is that if you've got areas of town, particularly where we've got old-fashioned or inefficient layouts, then those areas are, in my view, ripe for conversion. I'll give you one example at the moment where we're working with the housing department. I specifically asked that we put forward at least one exemplar project to actually show the developing fraternity what opportunities could be available if they started to expand their horizons and think a little bit more laterally than they've hitherto done. And that site is La Collette. Now, at the moment, La Collette is being considered, perhaps for demolition, not for refurbishment, because a demolition and complete new rebuild would actually allow us to double the density without actually detrimentally affecting the interior layouts. In fact, people would get more in terms of the interior layout amenities by a complete new build than a refurbishment prospect would otherwise give them.
We're going to have to stop, but there's just this last image I want to finish with. This was an image that was circulated a few weeks ago, that's in the Daily Mirror. The £150 house, which encompasses all sorts of novel ideas, including recycling of waste material. The guy apparently went round the skips or somewhere, and he's built this little cottage which would fit into Jersey admirably because it's got a little thatched roof on it. And all the greenies and all the historians will be delighted that we've managed to create this little pastiche of a 17th century cottage. We can go back even a couple more years. But it is an interesting concept that somebody would have the ability to produce a house at very, very low cost. So is there not scope, between your three groups, the planners, the designers, the buildings, the suppliers, can't we have a project in Jersey where we try to see what we can actually build? Can't we find ourselves a little corner somewhere and build an experimental house and see how we can actually do it for Jersey?
I think there have been a number of developments that have done something similar, but not quite down to the £150 kind of total mark. If you take the opportunity to read the full article and look at the videos on the internet, you'll find out that it was more than £150. I mean, the guy, obviously, if you do your own work, you don't necessarily have to kind of put in the labour costs. If you own your own land, you don't have to put in the land price. And if you build it out of mud or whatever, then...
there was an Irish architect, I don't know if they've got special powers in Ireland, but he built himself a house, a bit like on the Water Seagull principles, recently for about £40,000. What do you think of that, Derek? Is that a realistic figure to go for?
When last you go to East India Dock, the images, the myth isn't good. It's actually fantastic. It's containers.
Yeah.
You turn up there, you order your container, and there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 schemes there, very sophisticated, fitted out for living and office. And the reason why the office is so successful, your view across the Thames is the Dome, and you're 10 minutes from Canary Wharf. It's extraordinarily successful. The Jersey Housing Group's been there,
Yeah.
and it's extraordinary. East India Dock.
I've been campaigning to do away with porter cabins. The architect suggests that's possibly what we need.
The rebirth of.
Excuse me, there's another scheme in the middle of it.
No, I entirely sympathise with you,
That is that are for teachers, and it's a group of containers, 5-storey size, and you wouldn't know it's a container, okay? You wouldn't know, and it works. I mean, say we like your kind of living stuff, you got it right. You really need to get it right, and I can't see why it can't be got right here.
With your insulated panels, Greg, realistically, if you're looking at that sort of thing, container type technology, the £150 house, if you're thinking, if you're saying, where could you get to? Absolutely minimal strip bare price could you build a box that people could live in?
Well, as a total build cost.
Yeah.
In Jersey it's difficult to say because we have a problem that we overspec finishes. Somebody wants to build a house as cheaply as possible, and I've had this through the years with people, money's tight, this, that and the next thing. Next thing you know, they put a £40,000 kitchen in. And you think they were scrimping and saving on the pennies of the fabric of the building, what will be there for, the kitchen I might replace in 15 years' time.
Decoration.
And I think that's more a society issue in Jersey. But
we better stop because we should be being longer than the MGM epic. So